What if the man you trusted with your heart, your future, and your unborn child had been systematically planning your destruction for months? Madison Carter thought she had the perfect life, a billionaire tech mogul husband, a Manhattan penthouse, and finally, the pregnancy she'd been dreaming of. But when she overheard a single phone conversation at Blake's IPO celebration, everything she believed about her marriage began to unravel. This isn't just a story about infidelity. This is about a calculated conspiracy so twisted, so methodically cruel, that it would make your blood run cold. Madison was about to discover that her husband and best friend hadn't just betrayed her trust. They had been building a case to have her declared mentally unstable, steal her child, and erase her from existence entirely. But they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated her. Stay with me as we dive into this psychological thriller that will make you question everyone you trust. And if this story keeps you on the edge of your seat like it did me, smash that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, share it with someone who loves a good plot twist, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories that will blow your mind. The champagne bubbles caught the light from the crystal chandeliers as Madison Carter stood beside her husband, watching Manhattan's elite celebrate Morrison Digital's record-breaking IPO launch. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, her stomach churned with a secret that could change everything. Blake Morrison commanded the room effortlessly, his sharp jawline and confident smile drawing investors like moths to flame. At 35, he had built a tech empire from nothing, and tonight marked his company's debut on the New York Stock Exchange. Madison had been there for every late night, every failed prototype, every breakthrough that led to this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, Blake's voice cut through the crowd. 5 years ago, Morrison Digital was just an idea scribbled on a napkin. Tonight, we're valued at $2.8 billion. The applause was thunderous. Madison forced a smile, her hand instinctively moving to her flat stomach. 3 weeks pregnant, she had taken 5 tests to be sure, each one confirming what felt impossible. After 2 years of trying, countless doctor visits, and Blake's increasing frustration with their project, it had finally happened. Riley Chen appeared beside her, radiant in a black designer dress that perfectly complemented her social media influencer aesthetic. Can you believe this turnout? I've been documenting everything for Blake's personal brand. This is going to generate massive engagement. Madison nodded absently. Riley had been her best friend since their Columbia days, the bold extrovert to Madison's quiet intensity. When Blake needed a PR specialist to manage his public image, Madison had recommended Riley without hesitation. It seemed perfect, her two favorite people working together. "You look pale," Riley observed, her phone camera still capturing candid shots of the party. "Are you feeling okay?" Before Madison could respond, she caught a fragment of Blake's voice from across the room. He stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, phone pressed to his ear, partially hidden behind a marble column. The marriage was always temporary. Blake's words carried just far enough for Madison to hear. A stability play for the board. You know how investors react to bachelor CEOs under 40? Madison's blood turned to ice. She strained to hear more, but Riley was chattering about engagement metrics and brand positioning. The room suddenly felt suffocating, the celebration noise becoming a distant roar. Who was Blake talking to? And what did he mean by temporary, Madison? Riley's voice seemed to come from underwater. "You're white as a sheet. I need some air," Madison whispered, pushing through the crowd toward the terrace. The cool October breeze hit her face as she stepped outside, gripping the railing of Blake's penthouse terrace. Central Park stretched below, a dark oasis in the glittering city. She had fallen in love with this view 3 years ago when Blake first brought her here. Now it felt like a gilded prison. Her phone buzzed, a text from her doctor's office confirming her appointment for next week. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had planned to tell Blake about the pregnancy tonight, after his moment of triumph. She had imagined his face lighting up, imagined him lifting her off her feet in joy. Instead, she had overheard him describing their marriage as a business arrangement. The terrace door opened behind her. "There you are." "Sure." Blake's arms encircled her waist, his cologne familiar and comforting, despite everything. "Sorry I've been so busy tonight. This whole circus is necessary for the stock price, but I'd rather be alone with you." Madison leaned into his embrace, searching his face for any sign of deception. He looked genuinely affectionate, the same man who had proposed to her on this very terrace 2 years ago. "Blake," she began carefully, "that phone call inside, work never stops," he said, kissing her temple. "Even tonight, I'm fielding calls from international markets. The Tokyo exchange opens in 6 hours." Relief flooded through her. Of course it was work. Blake lived and breathed Morrison Digital. She was being paranoid, pregnancy hormones making her emotional and suspicious. "I have something to tell you," she said, turning in his arms. "Something wonderful." Sonnen. Blake's expression shifted slightly, a micro-expression she might have missed if she hadn't been studying his face so intently. Was that annoyance, impatience? "Can it wait until tomorrow?" he asked, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I need to work the room for another hour. These connections are crucial for our next funding round." "Our next funding round? Not his. Our?" Madison clung to that word as doubt crept back in. "Of course," she said. "Tomorrow." But as Blake returned to his guests, Madison noticed him stop by the marble column where she had overheard the phone call. He pulled out his phone again, typed something quickly, then deleted it. His eyes found hers across the room, and for a moment, she saw something that chilled her to the bone. Calculation. The perfect husband. The perfect marriage. The perfect life she had built was about to crumble, and she was carrying his child. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching Madison's mood as she sat in their pristine white kitchen, staring at the pregnancy test results spread across the marble countertop. 5 different brands, all confirming the same miracle. She had rehearsed this moment a dozen times, imagining Blake's reaction, planning the perfect words. Blake entered the kitchen already dressed in his signature navy suit, scrolling through his phone with the focused intensity that had built his empire. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He had worked until 3 a.m., taking calls from Asian markets. "Coffee's ready," Madison said, gesturing to the expensive espresso machine he had insisted they needed. "Thanks, but I'm already running late." Blake barely looked up from his screen. The Morgan Stanley meeting got moved to 8:30. Madison watched him grab a protein bar in his briefcase. This wasn't how she had imagined this moment. In her fantasies, they were lying in bed on a lazy Sunday morning, or sharing a romantic dinner, not rushing through their morning routine like efficient strangers. "Blake, wait." The words tumbled out before she lost her nerve. "I need to tell you something important." He paused, checking his Rolex. "Can we talk tonight? This Morgan Stanley deal could fund our expansion into Southeast Asia. I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Blake's phone slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the marble floor. For a moment, his carefully controlled facade cracked, revealing something raw and unguarded. "Pregnant," he repeated, the words sounding foreign in his mouth. Madison nodded, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 weeks. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Blake's eyes darted to the pregnancy tests scattered across the counter, then back to her face. His expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and something else. Something that looked disturbingly like panic. "Are you?" he started, then stopped. "How sure are you?" 5 tests sure," Madison said, attempting a smile. "Plus blood work next week to confirm. But Blake, this is what we wanted. Remember we talked about starting a family after the IPO?" Blake ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, destroying hours of careful grooming. "Right. Yes. Of course." His voice sounded hollow, mechanical. "It's just the timing." "I know it's sooner than we planned," Madison said quickly, moving closer to him. "But maybe it's meant to be. Maybe this is the universe telling us we're ready." Blake's phone buzzed against the floor. Without looking at her, he bent to retrieve it, using the moment to compose himself. When he straightened, his mask was back in place, but Madison had seen the cracks. "You're right," he said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "This is wonderful news. Amazing timing. Actually, a Morrison heir to carry on the legacy." Something about the way he said Morrison heir made Madison's skin crawl. Not our baby or our child, but an heir. Like she was a broodmare producing the next generation of his dynasty. "Blake, are you okay? You seem..." "I'm fantastic," he said, but his voice was too bright, too forced. Just processing. This is huge. Madison. Life-changing. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered immediately. Morrison here. Yes, I know what time it is. Move the meeting to 9. I need an hour. He hung up and looked at Madison with an expression she couldn't read. I have to go. We'll celebrate tonight. Okay, dinner at 11 Madison Park. I'll make reservations. Before Madison could respond, Blake kissed her forehead, a perfunctory gesture that felt more like obligation than affection, and headed for the door. Blake, she called after him. Are you happy about the baby? He paused in the doorway, his back to her. For a moment, the silence stretched between them like a chasm. Of course I am, he said without turning around. It's exactly what we planned. But as the door closed behind him, Madison realized he had never actually said he was happy. He had said it was what they planned, what they wanted, what made sense for the Morrison legacy. He had given her every response except the one that mattered. Madison sank onto the kitchen stool, staring at the pregnancy tests that should have been symbols of joy, but now felt like evidence of a terrible mistake. Blake's reaction replayed in her mind, the panic in his eyes, the calculated responses, the way he had fled the apartment like she had announced a terminal diagnosis rather than a miracle. Her phone rang, startling her from her sprawling thoughts. Riley's name flashed on the screen. Madison, I saw Blake this morning, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Everything okay? Madison hesitated. She and Riley shared everything, but something held her back. Maybe it was the memory of Blake's strange reaction, or maybe it was the growing feeling that nothing in her perfect life was quite what it seemed. We had some news to process, Madison said carefully. Nothing bad, just big. Ooh, mysterious. Well, whatever it is, I'm here if you need to talk. Blake seemed pretty shaken up about something. After hanging up, Madison remained in the kitchen, surrounded by the trappings of her successful life, the designer appliances, the fresh flowers Blake had delivered weekly, the view of Central Park that had once seemed like a fairy tale. Everything looked the same, but something fundamental had shifted. She was pregnant with the child of a man who might not want to be a father. And for the first time in 3 years of marriage, she wondered if she really knew her husband at all. The morning sun finally broke through the gray clouds, streaming through the kitchen windows and illuminating the pregnancy tests on the counter. But instead of feeling hopeful, Madison felt the first cold touch of fear creeping up her spine. Something was very wrong. Blake didn't come home that night. Madison waited at 11 Madison Park until the hostess gently informed her that her party's reservation had been canceled 3 hours earlier. She sat alone at the bar, nursing a virgin mojito while couples around her celebrated anniversaries and proposals. The irony bitter as the lime in her drink. Her calls went straight to voicemail. Her texts remained unread. By midnight, Madison was pacing their penthouse like a caged animal, her mind cycling through possibilities. Car accident, emergency board meeting, international crisis requiring Blake's immediate attention. But deep down, she knew the truth was simpler and more devastating. He was avoiding her. The next morning brought no relief. Blake's side of the bed remained untouched, his absence a cold void that seemed to swallow all the warmth from their home. Madison called his assistant, Rebecca, who delivered practiced corporate speak about Mr. Morrison being in back-to-back meetings all day. Rebecca, I'm his wife, Madison said, her patience fraying. I just need to know if he's okay. Of course, Mrs. Morrison, I'll pass along your message. The line went dead, leaving Madison staring at her phone in disbelief. She had been dismissed by her own husband's assistant. That afternoon, Riley appeared at the penthouse with Thai takeout in a sympathetic expression. Spill, Riley demanded, settling onto the white leather sofa with containers of pad thai. You look like you haven't slept, and Blake's been MIA since yesterday. What's going on? Madison curled up beside her best friend, grateful for the human connection. I told him about the pregnancy. Riley's chopsticks froze halfway to her mouth. Pregnancy, Madison. Oh my God, when how? Why didn't you tell me first? 3 weeks along, Madison said, watching Riley's face carefully. I wanted to tell Blake first, but his reaction? She trailed off, not wanting to voice her fears. Was he not happy Because if Blake Morrison isn't thrilled about carrying on the family name, he's lost his mind. The way Riley said family name echoed Blake's own words about a Morrison heir. Madison filed that observation away. Another small piece of a puzzle she was only beginning to understand. He seemed shocked, overwhelmed. Then he disappeared. Riley set down her food and took Madison's hands. Honey, this is normal. Men panic about fatherhood. Remember when my brother found out Sarah was pregnant? He drove to Vegas and called from a blackjack table at 3 a.m. Madison wanted to believe her, but something felt different about Blake's reaction. It wasn't panic about responsibility. It was something colder, more calculated. Maybe you're right, Madison said, forcing a smile. I'm probably just hormonal and overreacting. Riley's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then quickly placed it face down on the coffee table. But not before Madison caught a glimpse of the notification preview, Blake Morrison. Work stuff, Riley said quickly, but color had crept into her cheeks. You know how he is about brand messaging during volatile periods? Madison nodded, but a cold suspicion was taking root in her chest. Why would Blake be texting Riley about work when he wasn't answering his own wife's calls? That evening, Blake finally returned home. Madison heard his key in the lock at nearly 11 p.m., followed by his careful footsteps across the hardwood floor. He was trying not to wake her, which meant he was avoiding conversation. She waited in bed, listening as he moved through their nightly routine. Shower, teeth. The soft sound of him retrieving clothes from his closet. When he finally slipped into bed beside her, she pretended to be asleep. Madison, he whispered. She didn't respond, though every muscle in her body was tense with the effort of feigning sleep. Blake sighed deeply, and she felt him settle onto his pillow. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her, might bridge the growing distance between them with touch. Instead, he picked up his phone and began typing. The blue glow from his screen cast strange shadows on the ceiling. Madison cracked one eye open, watching as Blake composed and deleted several messages. His face was illuminated by the phone's light, and she was struck by how much older he looked. New lines around his eyes, a tension in his jaw that hadn't been there a week ago. Finally, he seemed satisfied with whatever he had written. The phone disappeared, and darkness returned to their bedroom. But Madison lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and wondering who her husband had been texting at midnight. The next morning, Blake was gone before she woke up. A note on his pillow read, "Emergency in Singapore. Back Friday. We'll talk then." B, not love, Blake, or even Blake. Just B, like she was a business associate receiving a memo. Madison spent the day trying to distract herself with work, but her art gallery felt empty and meaningless. She was curating an exhibition of emerging artists, but the paintings that once excited her now seemed flat and lifeless. Everything felt different through the lens of her crumbling marriage. Riley stopped by around 3, bearing coffee and pastries from Madison's favorite bakery. "Thought you could use some cheering up," Riley said, but her usual effervescent energy seemed forced. "How are you feeling? Any morning sickness yet?" "Just tired," Madison said, accepting the decaf coffee gratefully. Blake had to fly to Singapore. Singapore? Riley's eyebrows shot up. That's sudden. Emergency meeting with potential investors. Apparently, Riley nodded knowingly. The Asian expansion is crucial for Q4 projections. Blake's been stressed about it for weeks. Madison studied her friend's face. He hasn't mentioned it to me. A flicker of something, guilt, embarrassment, crossed Riley's features. "Oh, you know Blake. He doesn't like to burden you with work stress. He compartmentalizes everything." But that wasn't true. Blake had always shared his business concerns with Madison. She had been his sounding board for major decisions, his confidant during difficult negotiations. "When had that changed, Riley?" Madison said slowly. "Has Blake seemed different to you lately?" "More distant." Riley busied herself arranging the pastries on a plate, avoiding eye contact. "Different how? I don't know. Secretive. Like he's keeping something from me." "Madison, honey, you're pregnant and emotional. Blake's under enormous pressure with the company going public. You're both just adjusting to a new normal." The words should have been comforting, but something in Riley's tone felt rehearsed, like she had practiced this conversation. Madison's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. If you want to know what your husband is really doing, check his credit card statements. Her blood ran cold. Riley, did you just get a text? Riley checked her phone. No. Why? Madison stared at the message, her mind racing. Who would send something like this, and why Madison? You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, Madison lied, deleting the message before Riley could see it. Just work stuff. But as Riley chatted about baby names and nursery designs, Madison couldn't shake the feeling that someone was trying to warn her about something terrible. And the person sitting beside her, her best friend of 10 years, was lying to her face. The foundation of her perfect life was cracking, and Madison was finally beginning to see the fault lines that had been there all along. Madison spent the weekend in a haze of denial and detective work. Blake's absence felt like a reprieve, allowing her to think clearly without his overwhelming presence clouding her judgment. She found herself analyzing every interaction, every conversation, searching for clues she had missed. The anonymous text haunted her. Saturday morning, she finally gave in to temptation and assessed their joint credit card account online. Blake handled their finances, claiming it was more efficient for one person to manage their portfolio. Madison had been grateful to avoid the tedium of bills and budgets. Now she realized how naive that had been. The credit card statements painted a picture she didn't recognize. Charges at restaurants she had never been to, during times when Blake claimed to be in board meetings, hotel rooms in the city when he said he was traveling, jewelry purchases from Tiffany that she had never received. But it was the recurring charge that made her stomach drop. RC Consulting, monthly retainer, $15,000. RC Consulting, Riley Chen, Consulting. Blake had been paying Riley $15,000 a month for the past 8 months, nearly double the amount they had discussed for her PR services. What kind of consulting required that much money? Madison's hands shook as she scrolled through more statements. Dinner charges at exclusive restaurants on nights when Blake claimed to be working late. Hotel room service charges at the plaza when he said he was in meetings across town. A pattern of deception that stretched back months. Her phone rang, making her jump. Riley's name flashed on the screen. Hey, babe. Riley's voice was artificially bright. How are you feeling today? Any cravings yet? Madison stared at the laptop screen, the evidence of Riley's financial relationship with her husband glowing like an accusation. I'm fine. Actually, I wanted to ask you about your work with Blake. A pause. My work. The PR consulting. How's that going? Oh, great, really great. Blake's brand metrics are through the roof since the IPO. We're seeing amazing engagement across all platforms. Madison closed her eyes, recognizing the corporate speak that Riley used to deflect difficult questions. And the monthly retainer, $15,000, seems like a lot for social media management. The silence stretched so long that Madison wondered if the call had dropped. Riley, sorry, how did you know about the retainer amount? I saw it on our credit card statement. Another pause. When Riley spoke again, her voice was different, harder, more defensive. Blake wanted premium service, full brand management, crisis communications, media strategy. It's actually below market rate for someone of his profile. The explanation sounded reasonable, but something about Riley's tone set off alarm bells. Madison had known Riley for 10 years, and she was definitely lying. Where did you have dinner last Tuesday? Madison asked suddenly. Tuesday, I can't remember. Why? Blake said he was working late, but there's a charge at Le Bernardin for 2 people. Expensive wine, multiple courses. Seems like more than a business meeting. The silence this time was deafening. Madison. Riley's voice was careful, measured. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Are you and Blake having an affair? Riley's gasp sounded genuine, but Madison had learned not to trust her own instincts about the people closest to her. How can you even ask me that I'm your best friend? I would never. Then explain the dinners, the hotel charges, the $15,000 a month. Madison, you're being paranoid. Pregnancy hormones can make you suspicious, and don't. Madison's voice cut through Riley's explanation like a blade. Don't blame this on pregnancy hormones. I know what I'm seeing. What you're seeing is a business relationship between colleagues. Blake values my expertise, and he pays accordingly. The dinners are client meetings. The hotel charges are probably from when he books conference rooms for presentations. The explanations sounded plausible, but they felt hollow. Madison wanted to believe her friend, wanted to trust that her marriage wasn't a complete sham, but the evidence was overwhelming. "I need to go," Madison said. "Madison, wait. Don't let suspicion poison your marriage. Blake loves you. We all see how devoted he is." After hanging up, Madison sat in the silence of her penthouse, surrounded by the luxury that Blake's success had provided. Everything felt contaminated now. The art on the walls, the designer furniture, even the air itself seemed thick with deception. Her phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "Hotel Meridian, room 1247. Tonight at 8 p.m. See for yourself." Madison stared at the message, her heart pounding. Someone was giving her specific information, almost like they wanted her to catch Blake and Riley together. But why and who? She could ignore it. She could wait for Blake to return from Singapore and confront him directly. She could trust her husband and believe Riley's explanations, or she could find out the truth. At 7:30 that evening, Madison found herself standing outside the Hotel Meridian, her entire body trembling with adrenaline and dread. She had never done anything like this in her life, following her husband, spying on her best friend, creeping around hotel lobbies like a private investigator. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt endless. Her reflection in the polished doors showed a pale, frightened woman she barely recognized. When had she become someone who needed to catch her husband in lies? Room 1247 was at the end of a long hallway. Madison approached slowly, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure other guests could hear it. She pressed her ear to the door, feeling foolish and desperate. Laughter. Blake's distinctive laugh, the one he reserved for private moments when his guard was down. And another voice, higher, melodic, unmistakably Riley's. Madison's knees nearly buckled. They were here, together, in a hotel room while Blake was supposedly in Singapore. She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking so badly she could barely unlock the screen. She needed evidence. Photos. Something concrete that Blake couldn't explain away with his silver tongue and logical arguments. The hotel room door opened just as Madison raised her phone to take a picture. Blake stood in the doorway, his shirt unbuttoned, his hair disheveled. Behind him, Madison could see Riley sitting on the bed, wearing nothing but Blake's blazer. For a moment, the three of them formed a frozen tableau. Husband, wife, and best friend caught in the perfect moment of betrayal. Blake's face cycled through shock, panic, and something that looked almost like relief, as if he was tired of pretending. "Madison," he said quietly, "this isn't what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like. And as Madison turned and ran toward the elevator, she realized that her perfect life hadn't just cracked, it had shattered completely. Madison barely made it home before the nausea hit. She spent an hour hunched over the toilet, her body rejecting everything as violently as her mind was rejecting the truth she had witnessed. When the retching finally stopped, she sat on the cold bathroom floor, staring at the pregnancy test she had saved from that first morning. 3 weeks ago, she had been planning to build a family with the man she loved. Now she was carrying the child of a stranger who had been lying to her for months. Her phone rang constantly, Blake's number flashing on the screen like an accusation. She let it go to voicemail, unable to face his voice or his inevitable excuses. Riley called too, her messages increasingly frantic. "Madison, please let me explain. It's not what you think. Call me back, please." By midnight, the calls stopped. Madison finally emerged from the bathroom, moving through her penthouse like a ghost. Everything looked the same, but she saw it all differently now. The art Blake had claimed to choose for her, had Riley been there for those shopping trips, the furniture they had selected together, had Riley offered input on fabrics and colors. How long had this been going on? How much of her marriage had been a performance? Madison's laptop still sat open on the kitchen counter, credit card statements glowing on the screen. She scrolled back further, looking for the beginning of the deception. The pattern emerged slowly, dinner charges and hotel rooms starting about a year ago. Right around the time Blake had hired Riley for PR consulting, a year. They had been having an affair for a year while Madison planned surprise parties for Blake's birthday, while she underwent fertility treatments, while she believed she was building a future with her husband. Her phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number that had been feeding her information. Check Blake's laptop. Password is Madison 2019. Look in the folder marked Strategy. Madison stared at the message. Someone was definitely helping her uncover the truth. But who and why did they know Blake's password? Blake's home office was his sanctuary, a room she rarely entered except to deliver coffee during his late-night work sessions. His laptop sat closed on the mahogany desk, surrounded by legal documents and financial reports from the IPO. Madison had never violated Blake's privacy before. Even when curiosity tempted her, she had respected his boundaries. Now those boundaries felt like walls designed to keep her in the dark. The password worked. Blake's desktop appeared, organized with the obsessive precision that characterized every aspect of his life. The strategy folder contained dozens of documents with names like brand management and crisis communications. Madison opened the first file and felt her world tilt on its axis. It wasn't business strategy. It was a comprehensive plan to destroy her credibility and position Blake as the victim of an unstable wife. The document, dated 6 months ago, outlined a detailed campaign. Phase 1 established pattern of erratic behavior through documented incidents. Phase 2 introduce alternative narrative positioning Madison as emotionally unstable. Phase 3 leverage pregnancy as evidence of poor judgment and reckless decision-making. Phase 4 secure custody and financial advantage through documented instability. Madison scrolled through pages of psychological profiles, legal strategies, and media talking points. Blake and Riley had been planning this for months, building a case against her while she slept beside him, trusted him, loved him. There were photos she didn't remember being taken, pictures of her crying after difficult fertility appointments, images that could be presented as evidence of emotional instability, videos from their security cameras showing her having normal emotional reactions to stress, labeled as erratic episodes. But it was the final folder that broke her completely. Post-divorce strategy. Inside were architectural plans for renovating the penthouse to accommodate Riley's belongings, guest lists for a wedding reception, even a draft press release announcing Blake's engagement to longtime friend and business partner Riley Chen. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future together while systematically destroying Madison's reputation and legal standing. Madison's hands shook as she opened one final document, Madison's psychiatric evaluation, Dr. Sarah Kim. The report, dated 2 weeks ago, described Madison as exhibiting signs of delusional thinking and emotional instability consistent with untreated mental health conditions. It recommended immediate intervention and questioned her fitness for motherhood. But Madison had never seen Dr. Sarah Kim. She had never had a psychiatric evaluation. The report was completely fabricated. Madison printed everything, her printer working overtime to document the conspiracy against her. As the pages accumulated, she realized the scope of Blake's betrayal went far beyond a simple affair. This was calculated, systematic destruction designed to leave her with nothing. Her phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. Mrs. Morrison. The voice was male, professional. This is Detective Cooper Morrison with the NYPD. Morrison, Blake's last name. But Blake didn't have any family in law enforcement. I think there's been a mistake, Madison said. No mistake. I'm Blake's brother, his estranged brother, which is why he never mentions me. We need to talk. Madison's mind reeled. Blake had a brother in all their years together. He had never mentioned family beyond his deceased parents. Mrs. Morrison, I've been investigating Blake for months as part of a financial fraud case. What I've uncovered affects you directly. Can we meet? I don't understand. Your husband isn't just cheating on you. He's been embezzling money from Morrison Digital to fund his affair and pay for fabricated evidence against you. The psychiatric evaluation, the hotel receipts, even some of the photos, they're all part of an elaborate scheme. Madison sank into Blake's desk chair, overwhelmed by the cascade of revelations. Why are you telling me this? Because I've been watching him destroy other people's lives for years, and I finally have enough evidence to stop him, but I need your help. What kind of help? Blake doesn't know I exist. You can gather evidence that I can't access legally, financial records, communications with Riley, Documentation of the conspiracy against you. Madison looked at the printed pages scattered across Blake's desk. Evidence of a betrayal so complete, it had rewritten her entire reality. What do I have to do? First, we need to protect you. Blake's planning to have you committed for psychiatric evaluation tomorrow. The paperwork is already filed. Madison's blood turned to ice. Committed? Involuntary hold based on the fabricated psychiatric report. Once you're institutionalized, he'll file for emergency custody of your child and divorce proceedings. By the time you're released, he'll have legal control over everything. The room spun around Madison as the full scope of Blake's plan became clear. This wasn't just adultery, it was complete annihilation. Mrs. Morrison, are you there? Yes, Madison whispered. I'm here. Good, because we don't have much time. Blake's flight lands at 6 a.m. tomorrow, and the commitment order goes into effect at noon. Madison looked around Blake's office, seeing it now as the command center of a military operation designed to destroy her life. Every document, every file, every carefully organized folder was ammunition in a war she hadn't even known she was fighting. But now she knew, and she had less than 12 hours to fight back. Tell me what to do, Madison said, her voice growing stronger with each word. Tell me how to stop him. The battle for her life was about to begin. Cooper Morrison looked nothing like Blake. Where her husband was polished and predatory, Cooper was rumpled and gentle, a university professor whose idea of power dressing was a blazer with elbow patches. They met at a 24-hour diner in Queens, far from Blake's Manhattan kingdom. Thank you for coming, Cooper said, sliding a manila folder across the scarred table. I know this is overwhelming. Madison's hands shook as she opened the folder. Inside were financial documents showing a pattern of embezzlement that stretched back 2 years. Money siphoned from Morrison Digital into shell companies, then funneled to pay for luxury apartments, expensive gifts, and fabricated evidence. Blake has been stealing from his own company, Madison asked. Among other things, the psychiatric evaluation alone cost him $50,000. Dr. Sarah Kim is a real psychiatrist, but she's been writing false reports in exchange for cash payments. Madison studied Cooper's face, searching for resemblance to the man she had married. Why doesn't Blake ever mention you? Cooper's laugh was bitter. Because I'm everything he despises. A middle-class academic who chose purpose over profit. Blake wrote me off years ago when I refused to invest my inheritance in his startup. But you're investigating him. I'm an investigative journalist, not a cop. Sorry for the deception, but people are more willing to talk to police than reporters. I've been tracking Blake's pattern of behavior for a story about corporate fraud in the tech sector. Madison felt a flicker of hope. So you can expose him? I can try, but Blake is well connected and legally insulated. The best I can do is gather enough evidence to prevent him from destroying you completely. They spent the next hour reviewing Cooper's evidence. Blake's conspiracy was even more extensive than Madison had realized. He had been building cases against multiple business partners, preparing to eliminate anyone who posed a threat to his control of Morrison Digital. He did this to his first wife too, Cooper explained, showing Madison newspaper clippings from 5 years ago. Sarah Morrison, brilliant software engineer who helped him develop the core algorithm that made him rich. Blake divorced her, claimed she was mentally unstable, took everything. She ended up in a psychiatric facility for 6 months. Madison stared at the photo of a woman who looked eerily similar to her. Brunette, artistic, trusting. Where is she now? Dead. Suicide. 2 years ago. Blake sent flowers to the funeral. The cruelty of it took Madison's breath away. Blake hadn't just destroyed his first wife's life. He had driven her to death, then attended her funeral like a concerned mourner. He's going to do the same thing to you unless we stop him, Cooper said quietly. Madison thought of the baby growing inside her, the innocent life that Blake saw as leverage in his game of control and manipulation. What's your plan? Cooper's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Since Blake believed Madison was unaware of his conspiracy, they would use that assumption against him. Madison would return home, act like a grieving wife who had caught her husband cheating, and gather more evidence while Blake's guard was down. He'll expect you to be emotional and irrational, Cooper explained. Let him think you are. Meanwhile, document everything. Record conversations if possible. The more evidence we have, the stronger our position. Madison returned to the penthouse at dawn, exhausted but determined. She had spent years being the perfect wife, accommodating Blake's needs and supporting his ambitions. Now she would use those same skills to destroy him. Blake was waiting for her in the living room, still wearing his clothes from the night before. His hair was disheveled, his usually perfect appearance cracked with genuine distress. "Madison?" He stood as she entered, his voice heavy with what sounded like remorse. "We need to talk." "Do we?" Madison kept her voice cold but not hysterical, disappointed but not deranged. "What you saw last night, it's complicated." Madison sat on the opposite end of the sofa, maintaining distance while studying Blake's face. He looked genuinely anguished, and for a moment she wondered if Cooper was wrong, if there was some explanation that would make sense of everything. "How is it complicated? Blake, you were in a hotel room with my best friend while you were supposed to be in Singapore." Blake ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of vulnerability that once would have melted her heart. "Riley and I, it started as business. She was helping me with some sensitive corporate matters, and we had to meet privately to avoid media attention. Corporate matters that required her to be half naked." "Madison, please." Blake moved closer, his voice taking on the persuasive tone that had built his empire. "Riley has been helping me plan something special for you. For us. The hotel meetings, the secrecy, it was all about surprising you." Despite everything she knew, Madison felt a flicker of doubt. Blake was an expert manipulator, and even armed with the truth, she found herself wanting to believe him. What kind of surprise requires months of secret meetings and $15,000 a month? Blake's eyes lit up with what appeared to be genuine excitement. "A gallery. Madison, your own gallery. Riley has been negotiating with investors, setting up the business structure, handling all the legal work. I wanted to give it to you after the baby was born." The lie was so perfect, so perfectly tailored to Madison's dreams, that she almost believed it. A gallery had been her fantasy since college, a dream she had shelved to support Blake's career. "Show me the paperwork," Madison said. "It's all at Riley's office. She's been coordinating everything to maintain the surprise." Blake took her hands, his touch familiar and comforting. "Madison, I know what it looked like, but I swear to you, nothing happened. Riley was helping me wrap up the final details when you arrived." Madison looked into her husband's eyes, seeing sincerity and love and genuine remorse for causing her pain. For a moment, she almost forgot about the conspiracy documents, the fabricated psychiatric evaluation, the systematic plan to destroy her life. Blake was that good. "I want to see Riley," Madison said. "I want to hear this from her." "Of course. She's devastated that you misunderstood the situation. She's been crying all night, worried that she's ruined our friendship." Blake pulled out his phone and called Riley immediately, putting the call on speaker. Riley's voice, thick with tears, filled the room. "Madison, oh God, I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you about the gallery, but Blake made me promise to keep it secret. When you saw us at the hotel, we were just celebrating getting the final investor on board. I know how it looked, but nothing happened. Nothing would ever happen. You're my best friend." Riley's distress sounded completely genuine. Madison found herself softening despite the evidence she had seen. Despite Cooper's warnings, she wanted to believe that her marriage was salvageable, that her best friend was innocent, that the perfect life she had built wasn't entirely fiction. "Can I see the gallery plans?" Madison asked. "Absolutely," Riley said quickly. "I have everything at my office. Can you come over this afternoon? I'll show you everything." After the call ended, Blake wrapped Madison in his arms, holding her close while she wrestled with confusion and hope. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he murmured into her hair. "I know it looked terrible. But Madison, I love you. I love our baby. Everything I do is for our family." Madison allowed herself to sink into his embrace, feeling the familiar comfort of his presence. Maybe Cooper was wrong. Maybe the documents were fabricated. Maybe there was an innocent explanation for everything. "Promise me," she whispered against Blake's chest. "Promise me you're telling the truth." "I promise," Blake said, and his voice carried such conviction that Madison almost believed him. But as she prepared to visit Riley's office that afternoon, Madison slipped Cooper's evidence into her purse. Because even if she wanted to believe in happy endings, she had learned the hard way that hope without verification was just another word for denial. And she refused to be a victim again. Riley's office occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in Soho, all exposed brick and industrial lighting designed to convey creative authenticity. Madison had been here dozens of times, but today everything felt different, charged with secrets and hidden meanings. Riley embraced her at the elevator, holding on longer than usual. "Madison, I've been sick with worry. I can't believe you thought, Blake is like a brother to me." The word choice struck Madison as odd. Brothers don't pay their sisters $15,000 a month for undefined consulting services. "Show me the gallery plans," Madison said, keeping her voice neutral. Riley's office was chaos, mood boards and marketing materials scattered across every surface, empty coffee cups forming rings on important-looking documents. Madison had always admired Riley's creative energy, but now she wondered if the disorder was designed to hide evidence. "Everything's right here," Riley said, pulling out a thick portfolio. "We've been working on this for months. Blake wanted it to be perfect." The gallery plans were beautiful and detailed. Floor layouts, lighting designs, exhibition schedules featuring the emerging artists Madison championed. It was everything she had ever dreamed of, down to the smallest details that only someone who truly knew her would include. "This is incredible," Madison said, and meant it. "When did Blake start planning this?" "Right after the IPO went public. He said success meant nothing if he couldn't share it with the person who supported him through everything." The romantic gesture was so perfectly Blake, grand, thoughtful, and timed for maximum emotional impact. Madison felt tears pricking her eyes as she studied the renderings of her future gallery. "Madison," Riley's voice was gentle, "are you okay? I feel terrible. I accused you both of, when you were doing something so beautiful for me." Riley squeezed her hand. "You're pregnant and stressed. Anyone would have jumped to conclusions." Madison flipped through more pages, seeing detailed financial projections and investor agreements. The paperwork looked legitimate, complete with signatures and legal stamps. Either Blake really was planning to give her a gallery, or he had spent enormous effort creating an elaborate fake. "Who are the investors?" Madison asked. "A consortium of Blake's business contacts, tech entrepreneurs looking to diversify into art. Blake convinced them that emerging artists represent the next major investment opportunity." It sounded plausible. Blake had always been persuasive about untapped markets and future trends. Maybe Madison had let Cooper's conspiracy theories poison her judgment. "Can I see the lease agreement?" Riley hesitated for a fraction of a second. "It's at my lawyer's office. Final signatures are scheduled for next week, after Blake gets back from Singapore." "Blake's back. He never went to Singapore." Another hesitation. "Right. I meant after he finishes the follow-up meetings from the Singapore trip. You know how these international deals work." But Madison didn't know how international deals worked, and Riley knew that. She was being deliberately vague, using Madison's ignorance about business as cover for inconsistencies. Madison's phone buzzed with a text from Cooper. "Check the building directory. Riley's office lease is in Blake's name, paid for by Morrison Digital." Madison excused herself to use the bathroom, but instead she took the elevator down to the lobby and checked the building directory. Suite 4A was listed under Morrison Enterprises, not Riley Chen Consulting. Blake owned Riley's office. He was paying her rent, her salary, and maintaining her entire lifestyle. Their relationship wasn't a recent affair. It was a long-term financial arrangement that had evolved into something more intimate. Madison returned to the office with her composure intact but her faith shattered. "Riley, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." "Of course. How long have you been sleeping with my husband?" Riley's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, guilt, calculation, and finally resignation. "Madison, just tell me the truth. How long?" Riley sank into her desk chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." "Blake and we have a complicated relationship. Business and personal lines got blurred. But it's not about love. Madison, it's not about replacing you. Then what is it about? Riley looked out the window at the bustling Soho street below. Blake is building an empire. He needs allies who understand that empire comes first, before everything else. People who won't question his methods or demand explanations for difficult decisions. Madison felt the last of her hope crumbling. And I was questioning his methods. You were asking him to be someone he's not. The devoted husband, the excited father-to-be. Blake doesn't do vulnerability. Madison, he does results. So you became his ally. I became his partner, in business and everything else. Riley turned back to Madison, her expression almost pitying. Blake was never going to be the husband you wanted, but he could give you security, status, beautiful children. That should have been enough. Madison stared at her best friend, former best friend, seeing her clearly for the first time. Riley wasn't apologetic about the affair. She was explaining it like a business decision, a logical progression from professional collaboration to personal intimacy. The gallery, Madison said quietly. Is it real? Riley's silence was answer enough. The whole thing is fake. The plans, the investors, everything. Not fake, theoretical. Blake wanted to give you something to focus on during the pregnancy, to keep you busy while he handled more pressing matters. Madison stood up, her legs unsteady. More pressing matters like planning to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. Riley's face went white. How do you know about that? The admission hung in the air between them like a confession. Riley hadn't denied the commitment plan. She had revealed that she knew about it. You helped him plan it, Madison continued, pieces falling into place. The fabricated psychiatric evaluation, the documented erratic behavior, the photos and videos. You were gathering evidence against me. Madison, you have to understand, Blake was trying to protect you, protect the baby. Your behavior has been concerning, and he thought professional help might. Stop! Madison's voice cut through Riley's explanation like a blade. Just stop lying. Madison pulled out her phone and showed Riley the screenshots of the conspiracy documents. I know everything. The embezzlement, the fake psychiatric report, the plan to take my baby and marry you. I know all of it. Riley stared at the phone screen, her face cycling through shock, panic, and finally cold calculation. When she looked up, all pretense of friendship was gone. If you know everything, then you know you can't win, Riley said quietly. Blake has more money, better lawyers, and comprehensive documentation of your instability. Fighting him will only make things worse for you and the baby. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you advice. Take the settlement Blake offers. Disappear quietly. Let him raise the child with someone who can give them stability and unlimited resources. Madison backed toward the office door, finally seeing Riley for what she really was, not a victim of Blake's manipulation, but an equal partner in his campaign of destruction. One more question, Madison said. Were you ever really my friend? Riley considered this seriously, as if it were a business question requiring careful analysis. I was your friend until I met your husband, she said finally. Then I realized you were standing in the way of something much more important than friendship. Madison rode the elevator down to street level, her mind reeling from the scope of the betrayal. It wasn't just that Blake was having an affair. He had systematically turned her best friend into an instrument of psychological warfare. But as she walked through Soho's crowded streets, Madison felt something unexpected growing alongside her devastation. Rage, pure, clean, righteous anger that burned away the last traces of doubt and self-blame. Blake and Riley had underestimated her, dismissed her as a naive victim who would accept their version of reality. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Madison met Cooper at the same Queen's Diner, but this time she came armed with recordings. Her phone had captured Riley's admission about the psychiatric commitment, the fake gallery, and most damning of all, the casual dismissal of their 10-year friendship. This is good, Cooper said, reviewing the audio files. But it's not enough to stop what Blake has set in motion. The commitment order is already signed by a judge. Hospital transport is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Madison's coffee went cold as Cooper explained Blake's timeline. Her husband had orchestrated every detail with military precision, the fake Singapore trip to establish an alibi, the hotel room confrontation to trigger an emotional breakdown, the fabricated evidence to justify immediate psychiatric intervention. Once you're committed, Blake files for emergency custody based on your mental state. The divorce proceedings begin while you're institutionalized. By the time you're released, he'll have legal control over everything, including the baby. Madison pressed her hands to her stomach, feeling the tiny life that Blake saw as leverage in his power game. There has to be something we can do. There is, but it's risky. Cooper pulled out a flash drive. Blake doesn't know I exist, which means I've been able to gather evidence he thinks is secure. Financial records, communication logs, video surveillance from his office. Enough to prove the conspiracy and the embezzlement. What's the risk? We have to let Blake think his plan is working, right up until the moment we expose him publicly. That means you have to go home, act normally, and endure whatever psychological manipulation he's planned for tonight. Madison thought about facing Blake across their dinner table, pretending ignorance while he prepared to destroy her life. I don't know if I can do it. You have to. If Blake suspects we're onto him, he'll accelerate the timeline. The commitment order could be executed tonight instead of tomorrow morning. Cooper's plan was audacious and dangerous. While Blake believed Madison was spiraling into emotional breakdown, Cooper would be uploading evidence to every major news outlet and financial regulatory agency. The expose would go live at exactly 9 a.m., 1 hour before the psychiatric transport was scheduled to arrive. Blake's empire is built on investor confidence, Cooper explained. When they learn he's been embezzling money and destroying lives, Morrison Digital's stock will crater. The board will force him out, and the criminal charges will follow. Madison studied Cooper's face, seeing determination and something else, personal satisfaction at finally bringing down his brother. Why do you hate him so much? Cooper was quiet for a long moment. Blake destroyed our family when we were kids, convinced our parents I was the problem child while he was the golden boy. I spent my teenage years in boarding schools and therapy programs, while Blake got everything. Love, attention, trust funds. When our parents died, he inherited everything, and I got nothing. That must have been devastating. It was educational. I learned that Blake doesn't see people as human beings. We're all just variables in his equations for success. You, Riley, me. We're all expendable the moment we stop being useful. Madison thought about Blake's reaction to her pregnancy news, the cold calculation in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. What happened to his first wife? Really, Sarah Morrison was brilliant, creative, trusting, just like you. Blake used her expertise to build Morrison Digital, then discarded her when she became inconvenient. The psychiatric facility, the isolation from friends and family, the systematic destruction of her self-worth, it broke her completely. Madison felt a chill of recognition. Blake had been following the same playbook with her. Isolation disguised as protection, control disguised as care, manipulation disguised as love. I won't let him do that to me. Then you need to be stronger than Sarah was. And you need to trust me completely, even when it looks like everything is falling apart. Madison returned to the penthouse as evening shadows stretched across Central Park. Blake was waiting with champagne and takeout from her favorite restaurant, a peace offering designed to show his thoughtfulness and devotion. How did it go with Riley? He asked, pouring her sparkling water while he opened the champagne. She showed me the gallery plans. Blake, it's beautiful. I can't believe you've been planning this. Blake's smile seemed genuine as he pulled out his phone to show her additional renderings. I wanted to wait until after the baby was born, but since you know now, we can start the process early. I'm thinking a spring opening. Madison marveled at his performance. Blake was discussing fictional gallery openings while simultaneously planning to have her institutionalized in 12 hours. The disconnect was breathtaking. There's something I need to tell you, Madison said, following Cooper's script. I've been having some strange thoughts lately. Paranoid thoughts about you and Riley, about people trying to hurt me. Blake's expression shifted to concern so perfectly calibrated that Madison almost believed it was real. What kind of thoughts? I keep imagining conspiracies that don't make sense, like you're trying to steal my baby or have me committed. I know it's crazy, but the thoughts feel so real. Blake moved closer, taking her hands in his. Pregnancy can cause hormonal imbalances that affect mental state. These paranoid episodes aren't your fault, but they are concerning. Episodes. Madison, Yesterday, you accused me and Riley of having an affair based on completely innocent business meetings. Today, you're talking about conspiracy theories. I think we need to consider professional help. The gaslighting was masterful. Blake was using Madison's fake confession of paranoid thoughts to justify the commitment he had already arranged. He was making her collaboration in her own destruction. What kind of professional help? I've already spoken with Dr. Sarah Kim. She specializes in pregnancy-related psychological issues. She thinks a brief evaluation might help us understand what's happening. Madison let fear show in her eyes. Not fake fear, but real terror at how easily Blake could twist reality to serve his purposes. Would I have to go somewhere, leave home? Just for a few days, a quiet, supportive environment where specialists can help you process these concerning thoughts. Blake was describing psychiatric commitment like a spa retreat, his voice gentle and reassuring while he orchestrated her imprisonment. I'm scared, Blake. I know, sweetheart, but I'll be with you through everything. We'll get through this together. The lie was so perfect, delivered with such apparent sincerity, that Madison understood how Blake had fooled so many people for so long. He didn't just manipulate, he became whatever version of himself his audience needed to see. They spent the evening discussing baby names and nursery designs, Blake playing the devoted husband while Madison played the grateful wife. It was a performance within a performance, both of them acting roles while planning each other's destruction. At midnight, Blake's phone buzzed with what he claimed was an urgent work email. Madison watched him type a response, wondering if he was confirming tomorrow's psychiatric transport or coordinating with Riley about timing. I need to make a quick call, Blake said, kissing Madison's forehead. Business never sleeps. While Blake spoke quietly in his office, Madison texted Cooper. It's happening exactly like you predicted. He's confirmed the psychiatric evaluation. Cooper's response came immediately. Everything is uploaded and ready. Press releases go live in 9 hours. Whatever happens tomorrow morning, don't panic. Trust the plan. Madison deleted the text and returned to bed, lying beside her husband while he made final preparations to destroy her life. In 8 hours, the world would learn the truth about Blake Morrison. But first, she had to survive one more night in the golden cage he had built round her. Madison woke at dawn to the sound of Blake's shower running and coffee brewing in the kitchen. He moved through their morning routine with practiced efficiency, preparing for what he believed would be the final act in his campaign against her. She lay in bed, listening to her husband hum while he selected a suit for the day he planned to have her committed. The casual cruelty of it was almost incomprehensible. Blake could destroy lives while maintaining perfect emotional equilibrium. Good morning, beautiful, Blake said, emerging from the bathroom in his Navy power suit. How are you feeling today? Madison sat up slowly, letting exhaustion show in her face. Confused. The paranoid thoughts kept me awake. Blake's expression immediately shifted to concerned husband mode. What kind of thoughts? I keep imagining that you're not really going to work today, that you're planning something terrible. Madison let her voice tremble slightly. I know it doesn't make sense, but the fear feels so real. That's exactly what Dr. Kim warned me about. Pregnancy-induced paranoia can feel completely rational to the person experiencing it. Blake sat on the bed beside her, taking her hands. That's why getting help is so important. Madison marveled at his performance. Blake was using her fake paranoia to justify the very real conspiracy she had uncovered. The psychological manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. When would I need to see Dr. Kim? She's cleared her schedule for today. I thought we could go together after breakfast. Together? Of course, I won't leave you alone during this difficult time. Blake was maintaining the devoted husband facade right up until the moment psychiatric transport arrived. Madison wondered if he actually believed his own performance, or if he simply enjoyed the artistry of perfect deception. They ate breakfast in companionable silence, Blake reading financial news on his tablet while Madison pushed eggs around her plate. At 8:30, Blake's phone rang. Morrison here. Yes, everything is confirmed. The transport will arrive at 10. Perfect. Blake hung up and smiled at Madison. Dr. Kim's office confirming our appointment. Are you ready to get some help? Sweetheart. Madison nodded, playing her role in their mutual deception. In 30 minutes, Cooper's evidence would go live across every major news platform. Blake had no idea that his empire was about to crumble. At 8:55, Madison excused herself to use the bathroom. Her phone showed a text from Cooper. 5 minutes. Are you ready? Madison stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. In 5 minutes, her life would change forever. Either Cooper's plan would work and Blake's conspiracy would be exposed, or she would be on her way to psychiatric commitment with no hope of escape. She had spent 3 years being the perfect wife, accommodating Blake's needs and supporting his ambitions. Now she was about to become something else entirely, a woman who fought back. At exactly 9 a.m., Madison's phone exploded with notifications, news alerts, social media mentions, text messages from friends and colleagues. Cooper's evidence had gone live simultaneously across every major platform. Blake, Madison called from the bathroom. Something's happening. Check the news. She heard Blake's tablet chime with notifications, followed by a long silence. Then came the sound she had been waiting for. Blake's sharp intake of breath as he realized his perfect plan was disintegrating in real time. Madison emerged from the bathroom to find Blake staring at his tablet, his face cycling through shock, confusion, and growing panic. The screen showed a Forbes headline, Morrison Digital CEO accused of embezzlement and conspiracy against wife. This is impossible, Blake muttered, scrolling through the coverage. How did they get this information? Madison moved closer, pretending to see the news for the first time. Blake, what is this embezzlement conspiracy? Blake's eyes darted to her face, searching for signs that she was behind the exposure. But Madison's expression showed only confusion and concern, the perfect performance of an innocent wife. It's lie, Blake said, but his voice lacked conviction. Someone is trying to destroy me. More notifications flooded in. The SEC had opened an investigation. Morrison Digital stock had been suspended from trading. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting. Blake's phone rang. He answered without checking the caller ID. Blake Morrison. What do you mean resigned? I built this company. You can't do this without board approval. Madison watched her husband's empire collapse in real time. The man who had orchestrated elaborate conspiracies was being outmaneuvered by forces he couldn't control or manipulate. Blake, Madison said gently, maybe you should call a lawyer. Blake looked at her with suspicion that was almost comical. He still couldn't believe that his naive, trusting wife had orchestrated his downfall. The penthouse intercom buzzed, Madison answered, knowing exactly who it would be. Mrs. Morrison. This is Detective Williams with the NYPD. We have a warrant for Blake Morrison's arrest. Blake's face went white. Madison, don't let them up. This is a mistake. I have to. Blake, it's the police. Madison buzzed them up, watching Blake pace frantically while sirens wailed in the distance. His phone continued ringing. Reporters, investors, board members, everyone wanting answers that Blake couldn't provide. This doesn't make sense, Blake said, more to himself than to Madison. The evidence was secure. No one had access. What evidence? Madison asked innocently. Blake stared at her, and for the first time in their relationship, she saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear of consequences, but fear that he had fundamentally misunderstood who she was. The elevator opened, and Detective Williams entered with 3 other officers. They were efficient and professional, reading Blake his rights while he protested his innocence. Blake Morrison, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. As they cuffed Blake, he looked at Madison with an expression of dawning comprehension. You knew, he said quietly. Somehow, you knew everything. Madison met his gaze steadily. I knew my husband was a stranger. Everything else, I learned yesterday. Blake was led away in handcuffs, the golden boy of tech reduced to a common criminal. Madison watched from the penthouse windows as news vans surrounded the building and reporters crowded the sidewalk. Her phone rang. Cooper's number. It's over, Cooper said. Blake's been arrested. Morrison Digital is finished, and Riley Chen has been named as a co-conspirator. How are you holding up? Madison looked around the penthouse that had been her prison for 3 years. The art Blake had chosen to impress visitors, the furniture selected to project success, the view that had once seemed magical but now felt empty. I'm free, Madison said, and realized it was the first time in years that she meant it. But as she watched Blake's empire burn on every news channel, Madison knew her real challenge was just beginning. She was 6 weeks pregnant, financially devastated, and about to become the center of a media circus. However, for the first time in her marriage, she was facing the future as herself, not as Mrs. Blake Morrison, but as Madison Carter, a woman who had learned to fight for her life and won. 6 months later, Madison stood in a small gallery space in Brooklyn, hanging paintings by emerging artists whose work would have been dismissed by Blake's Manhattan elite. The gallery wasn't the fantasy Riley had shown her, no soaring ceilings or prime Soho location. But it was real, and it was hers. Her pregnancy had progressed beautifully despite the stress of Blake's trial and the media attention. At 28 weeks, she felt her daughter moving constantly, as if the baby was as eager to escape their confined circumstances as Madison had been. A daughter, not the Morrison heir Blake had envisioned, but a Carter woman who would grow up knowing her own worth. "The installation looks perfect," Cooper said, entering the gallery with coffee and the morning newspapers. Blake's sentencing had been front-page news for weeks, but today's coverage focused on his conviction, rather than speculation about his guilt. 25 years, Madison said, reading the headline. "He'll be 70 when he gets out. If he serves the full sentence, white-collar criminals usually get early release for good behavior." Madison touched her belly, feeling the baby respond to her voice. "She'll be grown by then. He'll never be part of her life." Cooper had become an unexpected source of stability during the chaos of Blake's downfall. Not romantic, Madison wasn't ready for that kind of vulnerability, but something deeper than friendship. He was family in the way Blake had never been, chosen rather than assigned. "Any word from Riley?" Cooper asked. "Her lawyer wants to make a deal. Testimony against Blake in exchange for reduced charges." Madison hung the final painting, stepping back to survey her work. "I don't care what happens to her anymore." That was mostly true. Madison had moved beyond anger into something more useful: indifference. Riley had revealed her true nature, and Madison had accepted it without needing forgiveness or revenge. The gallery opening that evening was small but meaningful. Local artists, community supporters, and a few journalists who had followed Madison's story from victim to survivor. No celebrity guests or society photographers, just people who understood that art mattered more than status. Madison wore a simple black dress that accommodated her growing belly, her hair pulled back in the efficient style she had adopted since leaving the world of appearances and performance. She looked younger somehow, despite everything she had endured. Madison Carter. A woman approached with a warm smile and gentle eyes. "I'm Sarah Martinez, the lawyer who helped with your divorce. I wanted to congratulate you on the gallery." Madison shook Sarah's hand, remembering the fierce advocate who had navigated the legal complexities of Blake's crimes. "Thank you for everything you did. I know it wasn't easy." Actually, it was easier than expected. Blake's conspiracy was so well documented that proving financial abuse was straightforward. Plus, the criminal charges gave us tremendous leverage in settlement negotiations. The divorce settlement had been substantial, not because Blake was generous, but because his assets were being liquidated to pay restitution to Morrison Digital's investors. Madison would never be wealthy, but she could support herself and her daughter without compromise. "How are you feeling about everything?" Sarah asked. "Really feeling, not the public relations version." Madison considered the question seriously. "Grateful, angry sometimes, but mostly grateful that I found out who Blake really was before our daughter was born into that dysfunction." And in the future, Madison looked around her gallery, seeing the artists whose work filled the space with color and hope. "I'm building something real this time. Not impressive or perfect, just real." As the evening wound down, Madison found herself alone with Cooper, cleaning up wine glasses and exhibition materials. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't investigated Blake?" Madison asked. Cooper was quiet for a moment. "I think Blake would have destroyed you the same way he destroyed Sarah. You would have spent years in psychiatric facilities while he raised your daughter to believe you were unstable." Madison shivered at the thought. "But you did investigate him." "Why? Because someone had to. Blake was getting away with destroying lives because his victims were isolated and discredited. Sarah died believing she was the problem. And now Blake is in prison. Morrison Digital's assets are being redistributed to victims, and Riley Chen is facing her own consequences. Justice isn't perfect, but it's something. Madison touched her belly as the baby stirred. Do you think she'll ask about her father someday? Probably. What will you tell her? Madison had thought about this question constantly during the long months of Blake's trial. The truth, that her father was a man who chose power over love, and that she deserves better than that example. And if she wants to know more, then I'll show her the court transcripts and let her decide for herself. I won't demonize Blake, but I won't protect her from reality either. Cooper smiled. She's lucky to have you as a mother. I'm lucky to have her as a daughter. She saved my life by forcing me to fight for something bigger than my own happiness. As they locked up the gallery and walked into the Brooklyn evening, Madison felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the artificial calm of her gilded cage, but the deep satisfaction of a life built on truth rather than performance. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the gallery coverage in the Times. Congratulations. You deserved better than what I gave you. B. Madison showed the message to Cooper, who read it with disgust. He's still trying to control the narrative, making himself the magnanimous ex-husband who wishes you well. Madison deleted the message without responding. He can write whatever story he wants from prison. It doesn't change what really happened. They walked in comfortable silence, past brownstones where real families lived real lives without the burden of maintaining perfect facades. Madison's apartment was small but bright, filled with art and books and the detritus of an authentic existence. Thank you, Madison said as Cooper prepared to leave. For everything, for seeing what Blake really was and giving me the chance to fight back. You did the fighting, Madison. I just provided the ammunition. After Cooper left, Madison sat in her nursery, surrounded by gifts from the gallery opening and plans for her daughter's future. She had chosen the name Emma, not because it tested well with focus groups or projected the right image, but because it meant whole or complete. Emma Carter would grow up knowing that wholeness came from within, that completeness wasn't something another person could provide or take away. She would learn early that love without respect was manipulation, that protection without honesty was control. Madison's phone rang, her mother's number. Sweetheart, I saw the news about the gallery. I'm so proud of you. Madison's relationship with her parents had been strained during her marriage to Blake. His subtle campaign to isolate her from family and friends had been so gradual that she hadn't recognized it until after his arrest. Thanks, Mom. I wish you could have been there tonight. We'll visit next month when the baby comes. Your father's already planning to spoil his granddaughter rotten. After the call, Madison prepared for bed, following the simple routine she had developed since leaving the penthouse. No elaborate skincare rituals or designer pajamas, just comfortable clothes and a cup of herbal tea while she read art books and felt Emma practicing gymnastics in her womb. The apartment was quiet except for the distant sounds of Brooklyn evening life. Couples walking home from dinner, teenagers laughing on stoops, the occasional car passing on the tree-lined street. It was the soundtrack of normal life. Something Madison had forgotten existed during her years in Blake's sterile tower. Her phone buzzed one final time. A message from an unknown number, but this one felt different. Mrs. Morrison, this is Dr. Elizabeth Harper from Columbia Presbyterian. I treated your husband's first wife, Sarah, during her hospitalization 5 years ago. I've been following your case in the news, and I wanted you to know that Sarah would be proud of how you fought back. She tried to warn people about Blake, but no one believed her. You succeeded where she couldn't. Thank you for that. Madison stared at the message, feeling a connection across time to the woman whose destruction had been a rehearsal for her own. Sarah Morrison had fought Blake with the same weapons Madison had used: truth, evidence, and the help of people who believed her story. The difference was that Sarah had fought alone, while Madison had found allies. Madison typed back, "Thank you for caring for Sarah. I hope she found peace." Dr. Harper's response came quickly. She did, toward the end. Sarah told me she believed another woman would eventually stop Blake. She said he was too arrogant to change his methods, and eventually he would underestimate someone. I think she would have liked knowing it was you. That night, Madison dreamed of Sarah Morrison, not the broken woman from the newspaper photos, but a vibrant software engineer whose brilliance had built an empire only to be discarded when she became inconvenient. In the dream, Sarah handed Emma a laptop and said, "Teach her to code her own future." Madison woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows and Emma's energetic morning routine. 6 weeks until her due date, and Madison felt ready in a way that would have been impossible 6 months ago. Her phone showed missed calls from reporters, gallery visitors wanting to purchase paintings, and 3 voicemails from women who had seen her story and wanted to share their own experiences with manipulative partners. Madison would return those calls first. Because Sarah Morrison had been right, there would always be another woman facing Blake's type of systematic destruction, and those women deserved to know they weren't alone, weren't crazy, and weren't powerless. The gallery had been more successful than Madison had dared hope. Not financially, that would take time, but in creating the kind of community she had always wanted. Artists supporting each other, collectors discovering new voices, young people seeing creativity as a viable path forward. It was the opposite of Blake's world, where success meant defeating others rather than lifting them up. Madison's doorbell rang at 9 a.m. She opened it to find a delivery person with an enormous flower arrangement, white orchids and roses, obscenely expensive and perfectly arranged. The card read, "For Emma's mother, wishing you both happiness, the Morrison Family Trust." Blake was still trying to insert himself into their lives, even from prison. The flowers were beautiful and completely inappropriate, a power move disguised as a gesture of goodwill. Madison handed the arrangement back to the delivery person. "Please return these. Wrong address." That afternoon, Madison met with her lawyer to finalize the last details of Blake's asset forfeiture. The Morrison Digital Settlement would fund a foundation supporting women entrepreneurs in the arts, a fitting use for money that had been stolen from so many people. "One final item," Sarah Martinez said, sliding a document across her desk. "Blake's legal team wants to establish a trust fund for Emma. They're offering $5 million. Madison didn't hesitate. "No. It's a substantial amount, enough to secure Emma's education and future. It's also a leash. Blake would use that money to maintain control over our daughter for the rest of her life." Madison thought about Sarah Morrison, who had probably faced similar offers disguised as generosity. "Emma will make her own way," Sarah smiled. "I thought you'd say that. The offer withdrawal papers are already prepared." Walking home through Prospect Park, Madison reflected on the strange mathematics of her new life. She had lost a Manhattan penthouse but gained a Brooklyn community. She had lost a billionaire husband but gained genuine friendships. She had lost financial security but gained something more valuable, the knowledge that she could rebuild from nothing. Emma kicked vigorously, as if applauding her mother's choices. That evening, Cooper arrived with takeout from the Ethiopian restaurant they had discovered near the gallery. It had become their tradition, dinner and planning sessions for the foundation that would grow from Blake's downfall. "I have news," Cooper said as they settled in Madison's living room. Riley Chen pled guilty to conspiracy charges. 2 years in minimum security, plus restitution. Madison felt no satisfaction at Riley's fate, only a distant sadness for the friendship that had been corrupted by ambition and greed. And Blake? His appeal was denied. He'll serve the full 25 years unless something extraordinary happens. Madison nodded, then changed the subject to the foundation's first grant recipients. Blake's fate was no longer her concern. Building Emma's future was. As Cooper left that night, he paused at Madison's door. "I need to tell you something. I'm moving to San Francisco next month. The Chronicle offered me an investigative position covering tech industry corruption." Madison felt a pang of loss, but also pride. Cooper had used his experience with Blake to become a respected journalist, and then this opportunity was the culmination of years of hard work. "That's wonderful. San Francisco needs someone who understands how charming sociopaths operate. I'll visit when Emma's born. And you can come west anytime. The gallery concept could work in multiple cities." After Cooper left, Madison sat alone in her apartment, feeling Emma's movements and contemplating the future. In 6 weeks, she would become a single mother with no family wealth, no powerful connections, and no guarantee of success. She had never been happier. The next morning brought Madison's favorite kind of surprise, an unexpected visitor. Dr. Harper from Columbia Presbyterian stood at her gallery door, holding a small wrapped package. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I wanted to give you something that belonged to Sarah." Inside the package was a laptop computer, old but well-maintained, with a note in careful handwriting, "For the woman who stops him, Sigh M." Madison's eyes filled with tears as she understood the significance. Sarah had somehow known that another woman would eventually challenge Blake, and she had left behind the tools for that fight. "She programmed it herself," Dr. Harper explained. "Software for tracking financial irregularities, communication patterns, anything that might help document his systematic abuse. Sarah spent her last months creating weapons for a war she wouldn't live to fight." Madison powered on the laptop, watching Sarah's programs initialize. Here was a final gift from the woman who had tried to warn the world about Blake Morrison, the digital equivalent of a sword passed from one warrior to another. "Thank you," Madison said, "for bringing this to me and for believing Sarah when no one else would." That afternoon, Madison began exploring Sarah's software, understanding for the first time the full scope of what Blake had done to his first wife. The programs revealed patterns of financial manipulation, social isolation, and psychological warfare that made Madison's own experience seem almost merciful by comparison. But Sarah had fought back in the only way she could, by creating tools for the next victim. Her final act of defiance was ensuring that Blake's methods would eventually be his downfall. Madison spent the evening updating Sarah's programs with her own experience, creating a comprehensive guide for recognizing and documenting systematic abuse. When Emma was old enough, Madison would teach her about Sarah Morrison, not as a cautionary tale, but as an example of how one woman's courage could save another's life. As the sun set over Brooklyn, Madison felt Emma's familiar evening activity and thought about the community they were building. Artists supporting each other, survivors helping victims, women ensuring that the next generation would be stronger and wiser. Blake Morrison had built an empire based on destroying others. Madison Carter was building something more powerful, a network of people committed to lifting each other up. In 6 weeks, Emma would be born into that network. She would grow up knowing that her worth wasn't determined by her father's approval or anyone else's expectations. She would learn that real strength came from connection, not domination. Madison closed Sarah's laptop and prepared for bed, grateful for the gift of another woman's courage and excited about the future they were creating together. All the women who had survived, who were surviving, and who would survive because someone had shown them it was possible. The perfect betrayal had become an imperfect but genuine victory. And that, Madison realized, was exactly what she had been fighting for all along.